Hey everyone, so I wanted to just make a guide because I'm making the video game along with my novella. The video game, it's not a video game, it's a board game that will be hosted online on my website, the same website as the wiki. So think of like a tabletop board game with the lore hosted on the same website, my website, and then also the novella in the form of an ebook. And then at that point, I'm probably going to finish all those projects in electronic form, and then I'll be able to develop this board game out. So once I have this thing play tested and balanced on the electronic front, I'll know for sure that I'm good to go on just paying a lot of money, to have it printed in hard copies and sell those to be played in person with, slight variations. So this will primarily be a browser game, guys. A turn-based browser game that you can play over multiple days if you want. A lot like chess or Go or checkers, And so this will be a tutorial in Godot because I figured I might as well show people how I do it because I already know how to, I don't already know, but I want to show all the stuff that I do know because I've tried to make harder games in Godot before, like harder projects, like real games. And so, yeah. And by real games, I mean games with real physics because it makes it harder when things have to match reality and be live responsive. Whereas this, it's just a game that is going to be modeled off of the board game Twilight Struggle, which is rated top 5 board games of all time, sometimes number 1 on Board Game Geek. And there's good reason for that. I was playing it with my fiance, and it's a lot of fun. And I have been wanting to put something into my board game world for a long time. And haven't really been able to. Sorry, I've been wanting to make a game set in my fictional universe for a long time. And it's taken a while to finally happen. So, by a long while, I mean I've been wanting to make a game for a really long time, but it's hard to make a game, guys. It's really, 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 really hard to make a game in any system. But I think I've found a really cool way for people to get their feet in, and that's to make a browser board game. Because if you make a board game, they're much easier to code and you can kind of just hijack the art, make the art. So for example, I use this awesome program called, or this website called Incarnation. I'll link it down below. And it just lets you create fantasy maps. Okay, so I was making a map for my novella. My map of the planet that my novella is set on. I can link that in the comments too, just to show you how I was using that and then I realized that it can make these textures right here. And so I was like, well, square textures, I mean, these kind of look like checkerboard tiles. That's interesting. And then, hey, get away. Oh, great. Yeah, I'm still learning Mac. And then I was like, oh, here's another tile set. That's interesting. And then I was like, oh, I need something that looks like space. And this was the closest I can get. And I can modulate it to make it darker, but it's kind of supposed to be purple outer space because this is set in my sci-fi universe. And this game is going to be spaceship versus spaceship. I have an entire episode spent. It's 20 minutes long describing how the game is going to work. It's inspired by Twilight Struggle and Go. You can think of it as a combination of Twilight Struggle and Go. Not Go, actually, more like chess. Twilight Struggle and chess. That's what it's like. Twilight Struggle, chess, and like an RTS put together. So this tutorial is going to be more about the mechanics over the game design, but basically this is a board game. So I want to show you the first thing I did, guys, because you really want to know how you set up your project in Godot. Right now I'll get into the actual tutorial after the intro. It's really helpful, in my opinion. I'm just going to show what I do, okay? And if it's not the best way to do it, then do it another way. But I find it very, very helpful to think only in terms of scenes instead of using this. You want this to be minimal. So I have it, but only for things that I don't mind being eternally tied, you know? So the whole thing in programming is you don't want to have cross-referencing, and Godot uses Python, so it's object-oriented, and you really want to abuse that, guys. You want to abuse object-oriented programming, the object orientation of Python, like just abuse. And so I'll show you how you can do that. All object-oriented means, I didn't get it for a long time, but it just means that you can define an entity and have that encompass anything just because of that one definition. So for example, you can define in game. You see how I have no main game? Like my main game is a separate scene, right? And if you look down here, if you see people who use Godot a long time for a while, they're down here more than they're up here, because this is where you save your scenes. So like I have the texture tiles, but if I minimize, you can see main game here. And I need to organize these folders better. I kind of just wait until they're disorganized, and then I'm like, oh, I can make a new folder, because I don't know what they're gonna look like when I first start making the game. But you can see how I don't mind having a static background for now. But if I wanted to someday, I would save. You would right click here, guys, and you go save branch as a scene. I'll just do it, and then you just go background.tscn. Boom. And then you can delete it. Wait, but where did it go? Isn't it deleted? No, you have it here. It's a scene now. So now what I could do is, instead of this texture, I could make it, you attach a script to this and say select texture at random, or select this based on this to have a dynamic background. And then over here, all you have to do is attach it to the script. So the way that I think that it's good, guys, to just do everything manual in code instead of UI. Because if you use the UI, you can use the UI after you understand what's going on, you know? But it's good to do things manual until you get it. And with this, it's very good to do it manual, because this is the core structure of your program. So the way I spawn main game, it took me, I had to research last night, because this is where Python gets a little weird at first. Variable main game equals, and then you preload the scene. And then in Godot, you have to instance the scene, because the scene is considered a packed scene. So it's like zipped kind of. So you'll get an error saying that, oh, this is a packed scene that you're trying to add a child to. We can't do that. So add child needs an instance of it. And so programming seems hard, guys, because there's all these little rules. This is the stuff that just this is the stuff that's just bashing your head against it until you learn all those little rules and reading the documentation. But all we're really doing here is polling this scene, right? This main game scene. So variable main game, we're calling it main game, and then self. So this root, the game root, the root node, add child, main game. And that would let me, and then I can do like, if, you can add like credits or something, I could do for whatever, or if whatever, to add like credits or settings. So like, you do self.addChild intro screen, and then you do like, so you would do add child info screen, and then you would do like the stuff for the controls, like if input. Well, you do the input, right? And then you can look up how to do. I'll show how to do the input stuff later, but you could make it like if the person hits escape, pull up the settings. If the person does this, pull up the main game. But when you're just starting, you just want to get a playable demo. That's what you want to do first, is get something that can be played, and then put the whistles and bells on after. And make it deep after. So, yeah, so that's kind of how we would do it. So you can guess how we would then instance the background scene. So var background equals preload. Where is it? It's just in the same place. So res is always just your main background resource. See? And you can't go higher than that. So if you want to reference something within Godot, it has to be at least in your resource folder. That's why you want to have it like well organized, because this is like the basic. This is like the structure of your of like your database, basically. Your game's database. These are almost like the contents of the tables almost. So you have to have like good tables, like texture tiles but you can look at other people's, the way they do. Every project's going to be unique. So you can kind of build them as needed, but at first you kind of have to pay extra attention because you'll forget. So we would just go background.tscn.instance self.addChild background. And then I personally, oh yeah, see, I just hit Control C. I'm just getting used to Mac. I put my Windows on the, I usually prefer to do it like this, but it doesn't matter. So I don't know if it's going to work until I try it, guys, because that's coding, honestly. Yep, we got both. This is the background, and then this is the game board. Now, why do we do it like this? Because, guys, oh my gosh, it changes everything. It lets you... Oh yeah, I'm still in that Discord call with myself muted and the output muted with some of my friends. Where's Godot? Yo, what's up, Godot? All right. I guess it's called Godot, but I just say Godot because it's easier, and it's I don't know, I just feel like Godot is two real words put together, and Godot is like easier to say. The T is silent. So anyway, guys, you can see how the reason why this is good is because it lets you keep everything really clean, guys. You're abusing Python. What you're doing here is you're manually doing what goes on up in here, but what it helps with, guys, when something's bugged out, you can just fix that one. It makes it so that all your bugged outness doesn't affect that much. It only affects that one area because you don't have any cross-referencing. Everything is instanced from something before it. So if your weapon gets glitched out, you're not glitching out. Like, let's say you have a gun module and that glitches out. You're not glitching out the whole program. It's only going to glitch out when you try to use the weapon or shoot. Because nothing is pulling from that. Nothing's waiting for that. Nothing's relying on that. You have to, that's how you have to abuse it. Because in C sharp, you have to do all that manually. And that's why it's really hard to make a game like that in C++. So, it's hard to make a big game. But you could make this in C++. And Godot supports, it's either C sharp or C++. I think C sharp is what Godot supports. But Python's really cool for this feature. And setting it up with that core structure, see, the only time I don't is when I'm working too. So in the early times, this is like the main game. And so this script is going to control everything. And then I can instance game start. But for now, I just leave it in here because, what else am I going to put? And, the game board is just a sprite. So I'm going to have to I'm going to have to define these actual quadrants. And I'll show you my idea for how I do that in the next tutorial. Ways that you can abuse object orientation to make it so that you don't have to really define these tiles to still make a tile-based board game. That way it's a lot easier, because if you were trying to actually draw this tile in a program like Krita, a free art program like Krita, it's a lot of work, and then you have to make the tile set like I did in the last time I tried to make I made a turn-based game in Godot, and tile by tile. But with this, you don't have to do it like that. So yeah, and you can see how the viewport. I made it 1280 by gosh. Sorry, I have a huge secondary monitor hooked up. But the settings are under display for the resolution, the primary viewport. The cool thing about a board game is you only need one viewport. You don't only have to worry about zoom or camera control, right? If you want to have something zoom like a card or something, you can just have it zoom up to the front of the player, Oh yeah, hey, I just realized I could put this board game into tabletop sim too. So if you just want to make your board game without it being its own browser game, you could also put it into Tabletop Simulator and balance it that way if you have people to play with, especially. But having it like this is really good too, because you can get a lot of play testing just with your friends and stuff like this, in a browser. Geez, man, who doesn't have a browser, right? In a turn-based game, it's hey, just check this after, when you first get into work, take your turn. We'll take one turn a day, And then you have different game modes, one for really deep. And your structure for designing games, you want to get the most amount of elegance and strategy out of the simplest rules possible. That's why Twilight Struggle and chess are so awesome. And StarCraft. Chess, StarCraft, it's simple in concept, and then it gets complicated because of the player's input and strategy and decision making. So you want to get the most decision making capacity you can out of the simplest rules that you can. If you're trying to make a board game, I feel like. Because there's board games like Madeira that have so many rules that they're not really accessible. And then there's other board games like Go that are insanely complicated and yet accessible even to a child. So, yeah, I'm going for probably, accessible to 13 and up this game. Because there is I'm going for the Terraforming Mars. It's a lot like Terraforming Mars difficulty. So, yeah. Anyway, besides that rant, here's where you do the displays. And I'm doing 1920 by 1080, but I don't think I should. I'm going to lower it back to something else. But you can see how when we're running the main game now, um, um, I want to have most of the info on the sides here. And so because I wanted a square board instead of a rectangular one. So this is what we're going to start with before we start coding. Always define your variables first. So you want to have kind of your key variables. What guides you? How do you know what to work on first? Get something playable. So what do I need right now? I need something that goes on the board and does something. And I need it so that the player. So this is what I would do. I would design my first card. I would code in the script of the card, and then for how it behaves and where it goes. But I wouldn't even do how it behaves yet. I would just make it so that when you click on it, it activates. So you put in this script, spawn card if, and then you have a new scene. That's your card will be its own scene, saved down here, right? And then I'm just gonna have that, and then you click it, and then you can say on the board where you want it to go, which square to go on, and then that's it. And then you can hit end turn, and then I'm gonna have it so that the enemy can do the same thing. And I want to have simultaneous turns in this game. This game will be simultaneous turns, but you'll see that it won't matter. Like, you guys take your turn simultaneously, and then you don't see what each other did until the action phase. Like, there's one resolution phase where everything's resolved completely. So it's like you take your turns, and then boom, go. Simultaneous resolution, and then yeah. So anyway, we'll go into that later, but that's all you really have to do to start. I have to define the columns first, and I have to design the UI. The first thing I want to do, just for looks, guys, Godot is really good for 2D. I'm going to put flaming light fixtures, objects, just straight ones going around the board in length. You know? And you can even just do it purely in code and make this thing, like you just use its dimensions. And you can I'm going to have like flame coming off the back or something. Some like cool animation to make it not sharp edges, like maybe just like black light or something, like sharp light. You can do anything in Godot. And then I need to make the UI. So that's so you put the UI in a control bin mainly. So this will be like the main UI, I would say, and then it would actually go game start would be its own thing, and then this would go in here. And then when the game starts, what did I put in here? Nothing. So then the control is what would control when game start gets spawned, because you don't know. I like to put things in the order they're really in. Thank you. So you want to I would put game start as something that happens when the control tells it to happen. And then the control is also what controls the UI. And then you would have the UI in its own bin. Sometimes some people do it like this, other people do it different. Like, it's like, I don't know all the different container kinds. I still have to get used to all these, but you can just use basic ones, general ones for these, for the overarching. So you have a bin that has everything in it, right? And then you have this. So this controls. This is basically like main game. And then what goes under main game? Well, depending on what else you might need, also the script helps to have one that's separate. But you could just put everything under the root node. I kind of just like to have middleman nodes so that they're easier to break off, right? So that you can just say, you know what, screw all this stuff and start over, without having to redo too much of the core program, right? Like minimal dependencies. So Middlemen are good, and inheritance is good, and defined objects are good. Abuse, abuse, abuse. Python, baby. Object orientation. So, yeah, let me think about. Oh, yeah, so then this would control. This control would be. So this would be. Uh, main main container, and then that controls the game start, and then whether or not you put in game under here, I guess. Yeah. And then this can be like the general UI, so that when I say start main container, when I say spawn, right now it's always going to spawn because it's just up here, because you don't have to do it all the time. Only after things get too complicated, then do this game start, which right now is empty. But this is going to control a lot of the variables and the scripts. I like to have them down here instead of up here. Once again, for dependency reasons. When things grow, you really start to see, like, I have enough failed projects now. This is my 5th time trying to make a game in Godot, and it's the simplest game I've tried to make. So, like, I kind of know how to go about it now. It's like I've screwed up enough times. And it's all about those cross dependencies. You want to have 0, and it's going to be hard to have 0, but you can if you break everything up into its own unit, right? So the general UI is just going to control what spawns and doesn't spawn, so that if those bugged spawn things, if the things that spawned are bugged out, I don't have to go into this script. I just go into the sprite script, or the game, or the object script that's under game start. And then the general UI just controls like what happens, right? Or the in-game UI just controls the input and output. You want the user interface to be just that, only the middleman. And you want to have, your dream goal would be to have your whole game only look like one big spawn, and everything is like another spawn of everything else, kind of. Just all inheritance instead of cross dependency. Vertical rather than horizontal. So yeah, guys, I think that's a good first Godot tutorial thingy. So I'm gonna stop it there and upload the unedited version to YouTube, because it can definitely help people just as is. And then I'm going to edit the audio a bit, and maybe cut it up a little bit for the final release. And then also the podcast release, I'll talk more about the actual game, and then edit out more of the actual Godot tutorial. So yeah, guys, Godot, free, open source, made by MIT, I believe, and then maintained by them too. I mean, it's the real deal. It's an awesome engine for 2D games, especially. If you're making a 2D game, use Godot. I would say that's just like a period. I'm confident to just put a hard period after the sentence. If you're making a 2D indie game, use Godot. So yeah, cool, guys. Thank you very, very much.